A single Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile can destroy half the coastline of any continent. This statement was made by the leadership of Roscosmos. The destructive power of just one element of the nuclear triad is enough to shock any normal person. So, what is the entire nuclear triad capable of? What are its components? And which superpowers possess all three of its deadly elements? In this episode, we'll answer these and other questions, and at the end, we'll talk about the classified Skif underwater missile system, which can lie dormant on the ocean floor for years. So be sure to watch this video until the end. The military uses the term nuclear triad to refer to three different types of weapons capable of delivering nuclear warheads: strategic aviation, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and submarine-launched missile carriers. Each of these types deserves attention. We have a separate video about nuclear submarines, and we recommend watching it for a more complete understanding. Today, we'll talk about strategic bombers and intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs for short. Which countries have managed to assemble a complete set of all three components of the triad? Only Russia and the United States have a full, deadly collection, which sets them apart from all other countries and makes the global nuclear standoff mainly an arms race between these two nations. The main principle that the military follows when deploying nuclear weapons is to distribute warheads among the main types of forces. This ensures that in the event of an enemy strike on existing arsenals, they will not be completely destroyed. Therefore, even if one or two basic components of the triad are disabled, there will still be the capability to deliver a devastating retaliatory strike. Some military experts claim that China or even India can be counted among the countries possessing a nuclear triad. However, their arsenals and the variety of delivery systems are significantly inferior to those of Russia and the United States, and they simply lack invaluable experience. Historically, heavy aircraft were the first carriers of nuclear free-fall bombs. As time went on and technology improved, bombs were replaced by missiles. Modern missile-carrying bombers have serious drawbacks. They require ground infrastructure and are stationed at bases that are vulnerable to enemy strikes. That's why using aircraft carrying nuclear weapons outside of the triad loses all meaning. Many countries that cannot afford to develop all delivery methods at once don't even start developing strategic bombers. What's the point of spending enormous resources on something that will be destroyed in the first minutes of a war? A bit later, we'll talk about how much the United States spends on developing its secret bombers. For the United States and Russia, strategic aviation is simply essential. In the 1960s, during moments of maximum military tension, both sides even organized airborne alert duty. This helped reduce the risk of aircraft being destroyed and saved precious time that would otherwise be spent on preparation and takeoff. Now the aircraft are on standby on the ground, maintaining a 5-minute combat readiness status. Strategic aviation, despite all its vulnerabilities, has a huge advantage that people often seem to forget. An aircraft taking off can be brought back to the ground if the alarm turns out to be false. But an intercontinental ballistic missile has no plans to return once it's launched. If an intercontinental ballistic missile launched due to a false alarm reaches its target, catastrophe is inevitable. Automatic systems will be triggered, a retaliatory strike will follow. The most destructive war in human history will begin, and most likely, civilization will be set back by several centuries. If it survives, of course. The main advantage of strategic bombers is their ability to make long-range flights and strike almost anywhere on the planet. Thanks to their ability to stay in the air for a long time, they can patrol the enemy's border, exerting political pressure without crossing the line allowed by international law. Strategic missile-carrying bombers are complex machines that require a high level of training not only for the pilots, but also for a huge team on the ground. Regular training keeps professionals in good shape. The Russian Ministry of Defense reports on some elements of training in its information bulletins. For example, in April of this year, two 160 and two 95 MS bombers launched cruise missiles at targets on the training ground during exercises. These aircraft are designed to carry out strike missions against the most important targets in remote areas and deep behind enemy lines. The crews practiced aerial refueling at an altitude of over 6,000 meters and a speed of about 600 kilometers per hour. The Tu-160 has been in service since 2005, and it saw its first combat action in 2015. The aircraft can ascend into the stratosphere. Thanks to this, the plane easily escapes enemy fighters and becomes unreachable for most air defense systems. A modified model is planned for release, which will be designated with the letter M. New onboard computing systems, an electronic warfare suite, and a weapons control system have already been created for them. The serial production of the newest aircraft is planned to begin in 2023. The military department will acquire at least 50 of these missile carriers. Experts call the Tu-160 an absolute record holder in terms of armament. After all, one White Swan can carry 45 tons of bombs and missiles into the air, and its maximum takeoff weight is as much as 275 tons, which is significantly more than its competitors. Tu-95. In the West, the MS is called the Bear. It doesn't have high-speed characteristics since it's a turboprop missile carrier. The first flight of this monster took place back in the distant 50s, and its peer is the creation of American engineers. The strategic bomber B-52. The supersonic bombers Tu, 22, and M3 are called the universal soldiers of Russia's long-range aviation. They are designed to carry out combat missions on land and naval theaters of military operations. They can strike both moving and stationary, single and group targets with missiles and bombs, day and night, in simple and complex weather conditions. British military experts call the Tu-22M3 the deadliest Russian aircraft in history. The further development of strategic bombers comes down to increasing flight range and creating new missiles. Speed takes a back seat, since it can no longer guarantee the survivability of the aircraft. The strategists of the future will have to deal with advanced surface-to-air missile systems and next-generation air-to-air missiles. Therefore, when developing aircraft, the emphasis is placed on reducing radar visibility. How does America respond in terms of strategic bombers? The heavy strategic bomber B-2 entered service with the United States Air Force in the 90s. Aircraft of this series are called the world's first stealth strategic bombers. The original wing design and the coating made of radar-absorbing materials make the aircraft almost invisible. Each of these birds is capable of flying more than 11,000 kilometers without refueling and can carry up to 27 tons. Armaments, including missiles with nuclear warheads. The Americans used the B-2 during the bombings of Yugoslavia, as well as in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Each plane is worth its weight in gold. In 1998, the cost of one such bomber was estimated at $1 billion, and taking into account development costs, $2 billion, which makes this plane the most expensive in the history of world aviation. By the way, the history of stealth technology deserves special attention. In 1966, an American radar specialist working at the Lockheed plant came across an article by Soviet physicist Pyotr Ufimtsev in a popular Soviet science and technology magazine. The article stated that aircraft of a certain type, made from specific materials, shaped and painted in a certain way, are practically invisible to radar. The article greatly interested American military specialists, and in the United States, they decided to build and test such an aircraft. As a result, in the early 1990s, the United States produced the F-117 fighter bomber and the very same heavy strategic bomber, the B-2. Moreover, Pyotr Ufimtsev himself participated in the creation of the latter. After all, in the 1980s, work on the Soviet stealth project based on Ufimtsev's ideas was stopped in Russia, and the designer emigrated to the United States. However, there is a theory that this technology was actually deliberately given to the Americans, since it had been tested in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and they decided to abandon it. After all, at least 2 Soviet design bureaus built and tested different types of stealth aircraft. Authoritative commissions came to conclusions that were not in favor of stealth technologies. One way or another, the top priority for American stealth bombers was chosen to be minimal visibility to air defense radars, and they started building a machine capable of breaking through air defense zones at high altitude and at supersonic speed. However, during the design process, it turned out that the Russian modification of the S-300 surface-to-air missile system would detect the B-2 at high altitude and shoot it down. Then the concept changed. It became necessary to break through to enemy targets at minimum altitude and, if possible, to follow the contours of the terrain. For a 170-ton giant, this is extremely difficult. The flight altitude was lowered, but only to about 70 meters, and the maximum speed became close to supersonic. In general, the designers were literally cornered, trying to achieve the lowest possible visibility for the aircraft. They achieved it at the expense of literally all other characteristics. Right now, the United States is developing the new B-21 bomber, which will replace the existing strategic models. The goal of American engineers is to reduce the size of the aircraft and replace the electronics with more modern ones. According to photographs obtained by researchers, infrastructure is actively being prepared at air bases for testing the new aircraft. The Americans also have this old-timer, the B-52 or Stratofortress, which has been in service with the United States Air Force since 1955. With planned upgrades, which are expected to cost $12 billion, it still remains the main long-range bomber of the United States Air Force, along with the B-1B Lancer. In turn, the supersonic strategic bomber with variable sweep wings, the B-1 Lancer, was created specifically as a nuclear weapons carrier to replace the B-52. However, in the early 1990s, the B-1 aircraft began to be converted to carry conventional weapons. China is not standing aside and is working on the advanced strategic bomber H-20. It is believed that in some technical characteristics, it may surpass the latest developments of both Russian and American designers. However, the authorities of the Celestial Empire keep all information under strict secrecy, which is not surprising. Let's move on to the next component of the nuclear triad. Real monsters, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They are designed to destroy targets at medium and long range using a nuclear warhead. Modern models are equipped with protection against missile defense systems by using decoys and multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. If you can try to deal with a single missile like this, no missile defense system can handle a barrage of such missiles. ICBMs are launched from stationary silos, mobile platforms, and nuclear submarines. The first serious developments in missile weaponry were made by Hitler's Germany. In the 1930s and 1940s, the development of the V-1 and V-2 was carried out in complete secrecy. After being defeated in World War I, Germany lost the prototypes, which ended up in the United States and the United States Soviet Republic almost simultaneously. For engineers in both countries, this was the discovery of the century. The Americans were able to create their own Redstone in just a year, and by 1948, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had developed the R-1 rocket. An intercontinental ballistic missile consists of booster stages and a warhead section. The warhead, countermeasure systems, and onboard electronics are located there. The missile's boost phase lasts up to 5 minutes, and the speed reached by the warhead is truly enormous, 6 to 8 kilometers per second. To confuse the missile defense system, transmitters, jammers, decoys, and various types of reflectors are used. The weight of the missile defense penetration system alone can reach 500 kilograms. A low flight altitude also significantly reduces the visibility of the intercontinental ballistic missile. The most protected missiles are considered to be those placed in silo-type launchers. These systems are so fortified and buried so deep that they can withstand a direct hit from an enemy intercontinental ballistic missile, which guarantees a retaliatory strike. Naturally, in both the United States and Russia, the silos are dispersed across the territory and kept secret. The warhead of an intercontinental ballistic missile spends most of its flight as a space object, rising to an altitude 3 times higher than the International Space Station. Of course, this entire enormous trajectory has to be calculated with maximum precision. Mobile launchers are distinguished by their rapid repositioning. They are extremely difficult to disable due to their detection complexity and protection. Of course, no one will name the exact number of such vehicles. Such missile systems are possessed by different countries, but it's also interesting to take a look at this unique combat railway missile system. It's also called the Ghost Train, or Train Number 0. Similar trains were developed in the United States as well. The official reasons for decommissioning such monsters were their outdated design, the high cost of restoring the production of the complex in Russia, and the preference for mobile launchers based on trucks. In April 2022, the first launch of the Sarmat complex took place. So that Washington would not perceive the launch as a threat, Moscow even warned the United States about the tests in advance. This is a missile complex with a heavy intercontinental liquid-fueled ballistic missile that weighs more than 200 tons. The Ministry of Defense noted that the calculated characteristics were confirmed at all stages of the flight. The training warheads arrived at the designated area of the Kura test range in Kamchatka. After the completion of the testing program, the missile complex will be put into service with the Strategic Missile Forces. According to the Ministry of Defense, Sarmat is the most powerful missile with the longest range in the world. It has unique characteristics that allow it to reliably overcome any existing missile defense systems. In 2016, the United States began developing its newest ballistic missile, Guardian. The company that won the competition to develop it received a contract worth more than $13 billion. The first test flight is scheduled for 2023, and the first units will be ready by 2029. In total, the United States plans to deploy 400 of these missiles. They will feature new guidance systems and electronic countermeasures, which should increase the missile's survivability in flight, its ability to overcome missile defense systems, and its accuracy. By the way, it was during the discussion of this development that journalists got hold of information about how much the United States spends on each component of the nuclear triad. Intercontinental ballistic missiles consume $2 billion of taxpayers' money per year. The operation and maintenance of strategic bombers cost $3 billion, and submarines about $4 billion. Well, now for the promised bonus. The Skif missile system is a nuclear weapon in the Russian Navy and is strictly classified. The system is capable of remaining on the ocean floor for many years before, on command, striking a designated target with a missile that flies at hypersonic speed and follows the terrain. The idea of creating ballistic missiles with permanent deployment on the ocean floor emerged back in the mid-60s. However, according to researchers, no development was carried out at that time. In the United States, the idea was abandoned altogether, as the project was considered too expensive and complex. But seabed deployment has an advantage compared to using submarines. A nuclear submarine can be tracked acoustically and destroyed, but the missile installation site, which is delivered to the deployment area by a special submarine, cannot be tracked by existing intelligence means. The thickness of the water weakens the impact, and in a strong container, Skif would survive even a detonation directly above it. In 2017, the head of the Defense and Security Committee of the Federation Council, Viktor Bondarev, stated that the seabed-based intercontinental ballistic missile is already in the arsenal of the Russian armed forces. However, neither the operating principle nor the technical details have been disclosed by the military to this day. Let's wrap it up here. It is believed that this is the main paradox of nuclear weapons. They not only pose a threat to humanity, but also ensure global security. But what do you personally think about this paradox? Can our planet do without the arms race? If so, how can this be achieved? Write in the comments, it will be interesting to read. Thank you for watching, for rating the episode, and see you in future episodes on our channel. Subtitles created by